So good morning, everyone. I'm Esther. Thank you so much for being here. I am president of the Korean American Democratic Committee. Just some background, thank you. So KDC was created in response to the 1992 LA uprising to promote the political empowerment, advocacy, and civic participation of the Korean American community within the framework of the Democratic Party principles. With that in mind, this forum began as a partnership between KDC, Through Peace, and World Mission University. Because being here in Koreatown, it matters. Though this place is where community gathers, affordability and survivability matter, and generational success through hard work and education are lived values, it's also a place that has historically been ignored and underestimated. Hence, we knew that it was the right place to bring decision makers directly to us. As this idea grew, we knew that we wanted to build something bigger. And this is why we invited CAUSE to partner with us. CAUSE has led important work in voter education, civic leadership, and community building, helping connect communities to information and to each other. So together we saw an opportunity to expand this space and deepen engagement. What started as a small collaboration has grown into a coalition of more than 40 AANHPI organizations with a collective message: we belong and we matter. So we also want to be clear that this is a nonpartisan and educational forum. It is not a debate. This space is about dialogue, learning, and meaningful engagement between candidates and the communities gathered here today. For transparency purposes, KDC and CAUSE invited the top gubernatorial candidates, regardless of party, based on fundraising totals reported to the California Secretary of State as of February 17, 2026. It was important that all candidates who met this threshold were invited to have the opportunity to speak directly to our communities. We wanted to share also a few brief guidelines to help us hold the space together. This is a community-centered forum, and we ask that all participants engage respectfully and in good faith. If any information shared during the forum is inaccurate, our moderators may offer brief clarifications to ensure the conversation remains grounded, informative, and accurate. We also recognize that many in the audience bring incredibly deep knowledge and lived experience. If you hear something that you believe needs clarification, we ask that you share that with our team or directly with campaign staff after the forum, rather than interrupting, so we can keep the conversation moving. We also ask that audience members just refrain from any disruptions so that we can hear from all candidates. Anyone who is disruptive, they may be asked to step aside so that the forum can continue. We also have shared guidelines with participants in advance, and if those are not followed, we will address it in real time to maintain the integrity of this conversation. So thank you all for letting us and helping us hold this space. Thank you. I know the rules, right? Okay. To the candidates who accepted our invitation and are joining us here today, thank you for being here. Thank you. We appreciate your willingness to engage with our communities. Our communities, as you can see, are paying attention, and we're eager to learn more about you and how your communities fit in your vision and plan for the great state of California. I also want to thank all our partners and sponsors who made today possible, including our venue sponsors, Through Peace and World Mission University, our media sponsor, AAPI Equity Alliance, and our many reception, translation, and outreach partners who helped bring this forum to life. Thank you.
Thank you.
This level of collaboration reflects the strength of our communities. Thank you, and 감사합니다. It is now my great pleasure to introduce my partner, Nancy Yap, Executive Director of CAUSE.
Thank you, Esther. I'm going to try to find my space. Good morning, everyone. I'm Nancy Yap. I'm the Executive Director of CAUSE. Thank you all for being here today with us. Asian and Pacific Islander communities remain in California because we believe in this place and in our place within it. We stay not only for opportunity, but out of hope, the belief that our lives, our labor, and our culture will continue to be reflected and valued in the state we help build. Today, more than 7 million Asian Americans, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders live in California, making up over 16% of the state's population and one of its fastest growing communities. We are deeply embedded in the state's economy with more than 750,000 AANHPI-owned businesses. Minority-owned small businesses make up nearly half of all businesses in California, supporting 2.5 million jobs and generating nearly $193 billion in economic output. At the same time, our communities are complex. We experience some of the largest income disparities of any racial group. We are also a large and engaged voting base with more than 4 million eligible AANHPI voters. In 2024, nearly 9 in 10 Asian American voters said they plan to vote, yet close to half reported not being contacted by either major political party. So we are here, we are engaged, and we are paying attention. But we are not monolithic. Our communities are diverse and deeply connected through networks of organizations, small businesses, and families that serve as trusted messengers and cultural anchors. That is the space we are creating here today. This forum centers Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities and is grounded in respect for the cultural values and leadership present in this room. As part of this, our partner, the Southern California Pacific Islander Community Response Team, along with other Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander organizations, will present each of the candidates with a lei. In Pacific cultures, a lei is a gesture of welcome, honor, and connection. We encourage candidates to wear it throughout the forum as a sign of respect and shared responsibility with the communities here today. So I just want to invite up our community leaders. So many of the people involved with today are not only here as community leaders, but also as close partners and friends to CAUSE, who are dedicated to civic engagement, especially through our Together We Vote efforts. So we just want to, please come on up. All right, I'm gonna keep going, but thank you so much. This is an opportunity to engage with communities that are shaping California's future in real time. Asian and Pacific Islander communities are not a subset of California. We are California, and we are ready to engage. Thank you so much. And thank you to the leaders who prepared these gifts. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderators for today. Andrea Mack, Programs Manager from CAUSE. And Dr. Nathan Chan, who is a professor at Loyola Marymount University's Bellarmine College of Liberal Arts, Political Science, and International Relations. They will walk us through the format and guide today's conversation. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you both, Nancy and Esther. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrea Mack with CAUSE. I am honored to be here today and serve as one of your moderators.
And I'm Dr. Nathan Chan of Loyola Marymount University, Professor of Asian American Politics, and I've also had the opportunity to work on research with all of our community partners today on voter access and participation in Los Angeles County. So thank you all for being here.
Before we get started, we're gonna start with a quick safety note. The fire exits are located through the doors that you came in and to the left of the elevators. In the unlikely event of an emergency, please follow staff instructions. Now we would like to briefly go over the format and expectations of today's forum.
So each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening remark, followed by a 90-second for each response to the question, and 1 minute for a closing remark. The order in which the candidates will speak has been randomized. To keep time and ensure fairness and consistency across all candidates, there's a timer on the screen that's visible to all of our candidates on the stage, and there will be a voice of God that will help with time management. So we ask that you please respect the allotted time.
We also ask that candidates be mindful of time and speak at a clear, measured pace. This forum will be translated into multiple languages after the event, and speaking at a steady pace helps ensure that the conversation is accessible to all of our communities. Thank you.
As we mentioned, this format is also intentional. The clear and concise responses allow us to share this conversation more broadly after the forum, across languages and platforms, so that our communities can engage with the information that is shared today.
And as shared, This is a community center forum. We hope that all participants are respectful of each other's time, space, and ability to listen to the candidates and what they have to share with us.
So today we'll be going over questions asked by community leaders, and we'll focus on several key issues, which include the following: the environment, voting rights, small businesses, affordability and the economy, healthcare, immigration, and leadership and representation.
These questions reflect the priorities and lived experience of the communities gathered here today.
So with that, we'll go ahead and begin with opening remarks from each candidate. As we mentioned, the order has been randomized throughout the forum. And again, each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening introduction of themselves. I'll go ahead and lay out the order of the opening remarks. Candidate Betty Yee, Candidate Antonio Villaragosa, Candidate Tom Steyer, Candidate Javier Becerra, Candidate Tony Thurmond. So we'll go ahead and start this round with Candidate Betty Yee.
Great. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. First, let me thank the organizers of this event and just let you know how impactful it is to actually be doing this forum right here in the community. My name is Betty Yee. I'm the 2-term former state controller and also spent about a decade on the State Board of Equalization. You know, many of you, I think, share a story with my family and my story. As the daughter of immigrants who grew up to immigrant parents from China, we didn't have a lot. My parents had a laundry and dry cleaning business when I was growing up, and guess who the best employees were of that business? I took care of the books for my family's laundry and dry cleaning business, and as I like to say, that was really the on-the-ground training that I had that started my career to ultimately take care of the books for the great state of California. You know, I think about my journey and how, you know, for all of us, and particularly all of us being really labeled as part of the model minority. And oftentimes, when I think about the model minority, and particularly these days that are so fraught with so many challenges, there are so many of our struggles that are hidden behind that myth. And that is what we're here to really try to uncover and also hope to address so that we can have a future for all of our communities, our diverse communities here, that is rooted in economic prosperity, that is rooted in being sure that we have access to all of the services that are available to anyone here in California to really uplift your livelihood, and also to be sure that we are equal participants in our democracy. We're going to talk about a lot of these issues today, but I'm just here to say thank you for being here. You know, just showing up is oftentimes a struggle because we oftentimes have these forums that are not accessible. To have you here really means a lot. So I am ready to dive into the questions, but I'm just going to say this. I hope to be the symbol that within one generation of my parents, my mother's still alive, 103 years old, that she's going to be able to witness her daughter become the next governor of the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Villaraigosa.
Good morning. Buenos dias. Ni hao. It's great to be here with all of you again. I'm looking through the room, and when I first got here, I saw so many people that have been representatives of my administration on commissions. 70% of my commissioners, my staff, were of color. We hadn't had that number before or since. It represented every community. And why? Because I understood that when you break a glass ceiling, when you're the first, the role of the first is to open up the door for the rest. And it was communities like this in the API community that got behind the candidacy, not just because I had, you know, the kind of experience I had coming out of the speakership, but because they knew I was a coalition builder. We need coalition builders right now. We need uniters right now. We need people that understand that we can't aggregate everybody into one group. The fact is, there are many groups, all of us, Latinos included, by the way. And so I want you to look at the record. The record is speaker, balanced 2 budgets with a surplus. How about that? A surplus with a Republican and a Democratic governor. When I became mayor, I don't have to remind you, this was the most dangerous big city in the United States of America. By the time I left, a 48% drop in violent crime. 1 out of 3 schools were failing when I became mayor. By the time we left, 1 out of 10, a 60% increase in the graduation rate. We're going to talk about environment. #1 American city in reducing greenhouse gases, #5 in the world. I built more infrastructure than anybody in the United States during that time. Downtown went from 20,000 to 60,000 people. I'd be honored to have your support.
Thank you. Candidate Tom Steyer.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Before I talk about myself, I want to talk for a second about what my campaign is about. And my campaign is about the fact that Californians can't afford to live in California anymore. And that is the #1 issue for the people in this state, and that's the #1 issue my campaign addresses every single day. And let me say, our campaign is also very much focused on working people and small businesses. They've been screwed for an awfully long time, and it's time to turn that around. So let me talk for a second about myself so you'll know a little bit about who I am. I come from a family that has always wanted to participate and give back to their community. My mom was a school teacher who taught in public schools, and when she retired, she taught in prison. My dad was a lawyer who prosecuted the Nazis as a naval officer at Nuremberg after World War II. My wife has been working on economic, environmental, and racial justice for her whole life, and I'm the weird one. I'm the one who started a business which no one in my family had ever done before, in one room, no windows, no partners, no employees, and it got to be a big business. And I ran it for 27 years, and I couldn't wait to get out of it, believe it or not, and walk away from the money, because I wanted to give back. And I got a chance just to give you an example of what I've been doing for the last 14 years. I took on big corporations, tobacco companies, oil companies, and beat them at the ballot box to get billions of dollars for Californians' education and healthcare without charging them a penny. With a lot of people in this room, we registered 1.2 million Californians to vote so that, in fact, we could change and get young people's voices heard. My wife and I started a nonprofit community bank so that people who couldn't get access to normal commercial banks could get credit. We financed 16,000 low-income housing units, and that's what I'm going to do as governor. I'm going to take on the special interests. I'm going to stand up for the people. I don't have any contradictions. I'm all in for this process.
Thank you. Candidate Javier Becerra.
Good morning, and thank you for having us here. I am thrilled to be back in my congressional district that I represented for 24 years. I am thrilled to be with communities that I worked with as a member of Congress when I was Attorney General, when there were attacks that were directed at our communities because of who we looked like, how we spoke, how we defended those families against those kinds of racial attacks. I am thrilled that I can be back in a community that helped us get vaccinations to so many people, especially families that could not afford the vaccines and the treatments. I am the son of immigrants, a construction worker and a clerical worker. I grew up in the home my dad built, a man with a 6th grade education. I am the first in my family to have an opportunity, and I know many of you did, go to college and get that college degree. Right now, Americans, Californians, we're looking for someone we can trust to lead us. We are looking for a leader who knows how to govern in crisis, because by God, we're going through some crises, whether it is the cost of living crisis here at home or whether it is the man-made crisis coming from Washington, D.C. every day. When I was your Attorney General, I stood up to defend the Affordable Care Act against Trump's efforts to eliminate it. I took him all the way to the Supreme Court, toe-to-toe, and we won in the U.S. Supreme Court and protected the Affordable Care. Donald Trump tried to eliminate the DACA program for Dreamers. I took him to court again. We ended up in the Supreme Court. We beat Donald Trump in Supreme Court and preserved the DACA program for all the Dreamers. When ICE tried to come in, we took him on, and we kept ICE from being able to do the raids along with our law enforcement. When I was secretary, made sure that everyone in America had access to the COVID vaccine without having to pay. We will stand up because it is time to have someone who can lead, you can trust because of experience. The governor's office is no place for training wheels. Let's vote and get a good governor. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Tony Thurmond.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. A better California is possible, and it's up to us to build it together. Before you is the son and grandson of immigrants who came here from Colombia and Jamaica and Panama, where my mother was born. My grandparents came here and they cleaned bathrooms for a living to create a better life for their family. By the time I was 6 years old, I lost both of my parents. I was raised by a cousin who I never met until I showed up on her doorstep, in a household where we often didn't have food, and we relied on public assistance programs like the free lunch program and food stamp coupons and a whole lot of government cheese. I don't know about y'all, but we ate so much government cheese, I thought USDA was a brand name. These programs helped my family to overcome poverty, and getting an education changed my life as a social worker, working with foster youth and seniors and people with disabilities, and then becoming elected as a council member, school board member, state legislator, and twice elected as state superintendent. I spent the last 18 years serving you. Together, we created the first law in our nation to say that every student in our state should learn about ethnic studies so they can learn about the contributions of their ancestors. During the pandemic, I stood with many of you as we fought against those who brought hate against our Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. And as governor, we won't stand for that. As state superintendent of our schools, I wrote a bill that is now the law that has kept ICE out of our schools and out of our hospitals. And together, we will work with Congress to abolish ICE and to create a pathway to citizenship for those who want the opportunity to live and work in our state and in our nation. As governor, we'll build 2 million housing units. We will provide housing for the 10,000 homeless teens in our state. We will make sure that there are great opportunities for small businesses in the AAPI community and throughout our state. A better California is possible. Let's build it together.
Thank you to all of our candidates for those introductions. We're gonna begin our first section with the environment. From this point forward, we'll move into 90-second responses so that we can hear from all candidates. Environmental resilience is not just about policy. It is about stewardship, long-term responsibility, and how we care about our communities across generations. Pacific Islander communities have long practiced caring for land, ocean, and sky as interconnected systems rooted in balance, reciprocity, and collective well-being. These approaches continue to inform how we think about long-term care and resilience. Here in California, challenges like wildfires, extreme heat, and water scarcity are closely tied to affordability, housing stability, and displacement. Addressing these issues require collaborations and leadership from the communities most impacted. With that, I would like to invite Alisi Tulua from Southern California Pacific Islander Community Response Team, SoCal Picker, to ask the first question.
In observation of Pacific Islander protocol, I give sacred acknowledgements to this land and its original peoples, the Tongva. May our gathering today contribute to your endeavors for your present and future generations. As the world's fourth largest economy and a leader in environmental policy, California has both the responsibility and the opportunity to lead on climate resilience in ways that are inclusive and accountable. What mechanisms would you put in place to ensure that Pacific Islander, Indigenous, and other frontline communities most impacted by environmental decisions have direct authority in shaping climate resilience strategies, equitable access to green jobs, training programs, and economic opportunities created by this transition, and safeguards to prevent displacement from affected industries?
All right, we're gonna go into responses from the candidates. As noted earlier, the order is randomized. I'm gonna read it out, and each candidate will have 90 seconds to give their response. The order for this set of questions will be starting with Candidate Becerra, then Candidate Yee, then Candidate Thurmond, then Candidate Villaraigosa, and then Candidate Steyer. So we're gonna start with Candidate Becerra.
Thank you for the question, because the future of California hinges on our doing this right. Because if we don't make the right use of our resources, we will lose everything, including our ability to afford to live in our great state. And so here's what I'll tell you I will do by telling you what I did. When I was the Attorney General, I created the Environmental Justice Bureau for the reason you just stated, because more often than not, the people first and worst hit by the environment and the degradation are communities that are disadvantaged. The freeways are always built through our communities. The big waste disposal plants are always built in our communities. The communities that are always ripped apart are the ones that have the least power. And so what I did is I created the Environmental Justice Bureau to give small communities a chance to fight whenever some injustice was going to be done when it came to the environment. When I was Secretary of Health and Human Services, I established the Climate Change and Health Equity Division because we knew that climate change was affecting our health. We declared a health crisis when it came to the climate because it was impacting, especially with extreme heat, outdoor workers, for example. So as governor, what will I do? I will make sure that we continue our transition to clean energy, but I will do it remembering that the people most in need of it are our working families, are the families that are left behind. So we will always consider that transition to make sure no one is left behind. And you will have a seat at the table to make those decisions.
Thank you. Candidate Yee?
It probably is not a surprise when I begin my remarks by saying we've done this to ourselves. You know, all we have to do is really look at how we center our frontline communities in the decisions that we make. Funding decisions, policy decisions. We can talk about progress in terms of our environmental goals, but frankly, that progress comes at the price of shifting the burden to those communities that have the least voice. And so, as your governor, this is my promise. Those who are the most heavily burdened will be front and center in terms of all of our policies related to funding and also how we're going to build not just environmental resilience, but also economic resilience. These two go hand in hand. You know, when we look at, as you all know, some of our most burdened communities are not being served appropriately now, not even getting information in basic, with basic in language capability. And so all of these things is really going to be about an all community effort with respect to how we come together, how we look at actually centering all of our decisions with respect to these communities and helping to build that resilience for the long term. I've been doing this work for a long time, and I see where dollars go. And when I was your controller, I can tell you that with the dollars that we had for building climate resilience, the least numbers of those dollars went to communities of color and low-income communities. And so we have to make a commitment, we have to be intentional, and we also need to use the wisdom, and I really appreciated the question because there's a lot of wisdom in the communities that are living these consequences, and I look forward to having you at the table to help us with these policies. Thank you.
Next, Candidate Thurmond.
Raise your right hand if you'd like to be appointed to a committee that focuses on environmental oversight. Raise your right hand. I swear you in right now. All opposed? Yes. Any opposed? We don't care. Listen, I thank you for the question. I today came from the land of the Tongva people in the Inland Empire, which has the designation of having the worst air quality in our country. For the last 25 years, I represented the city of Richmond, which is in the face of heavy industry. It is a city that sends more people to the hospital for asthma than any other city in that county. And so I submit to you that we have to have real policies that provide real penalties to those who pollute our environment. And as a legislator, I passed the toughest laws on those companies that pollute our environment. When you pollute our environment, you will pay. They will not accept our messages and our pleas for help. The only thing that companies that are greedy understand is when you put a fee on them, and that's what my legislation has done. My legislation has closed idle oil wells. I've also established new policies where we have solar panel installation in our construction job training programs. I serve as a regent at the University of California and as a trustee at the California State University system. You cannot tell me that we can send a person to the moon and we cannot solve climate change in our lifetime. And we can give water to those who don't have it in our state. As your governor, we will protect our environment and we will protect you and our state. Thank you.
Next, Candidate Villaragoisa.
Let me share with you the record, because the best way to know what somebody's going to do is to see what they've done. I grew up at a time when you couldn't go out to play in the yard because of dirty air. And so when I was speaker, I did the Carl Moyer Act to retrofit dirty diesel engines. When I was on the RTD board, I took us from the dirtiest all-diesel bus system to the cleanest in the United States, all CNG cleaner fuel vehicles. The port is the biggest emitter of carcinogens in California. It is the greenest port in the world. We planted 400,000 trees here in LA, and I focused on the neighborhoods that were people rich and park poor. So we put them in every community, including Koreatown, Chinatown, Thai town, Filipino town, Watts, the East Side. The next governor is going to have to focus on the fact that, yes, we have to take on climate change, but we can't do it on the backs of working people. And let me tell you why. Highest gas prices in the United States, on average $2 higher than everywhere else. The highest utility costs in the continental United States. 60% increase in the graduation rate. The next governor is going to have to focus on climate change, but do it in a way that doesn't put it all on the backs of working families. I'd be honored to have your support.
Next is Candidate Steyer.
So I think anyone who understands environmentalism in California knows you have to start with environmental justice. This is a state which has structurally been prejudiced and about where we put our roads, where we put our factories. And I'm someone who has worked for a long time. 10 years ago, I went down the coast of California to work with a community to stop a new natural gas plant in Puente. I've been down to below San Diego on the Mexican border where they've closed the beach for 4 years and still haven't declared a state of emergency because it's a low-income Latino community. Every decision about environmentalism has to start with EJ and has to include leadership from the people from those communities. But I want to talk for a second to put that in context. We have to actually stop the whole thing. First of all, polluters have to pay. That's where the money comes from to go to the frontline communities that have had bad things happen to them. Polluters pay. Second of all, we have the ability now to deploy clean energy that's cheaper, more secure. It's here, it's California technology. I want to triple the credit for an EV so we can get this to everybody as fast as possible. Every single environmental organization in this state has endorsed me. I've written a book on it. We need to do this so that we can create new businesses, so that we can create new jobs, and do what California does, which is to lead politically, economically, in every single way. We can do it right now.
Thank you. We'll now move into our next section on voting rights. Asian American and Pacific Islander voters are a growing and increasingly influential part of California's electorate. Yes. Since 2020, the AAPI population in California has grown from 6.7 million to 7.3 million. And the number of eligible voters has increased from 4.1 million to 4.5 million. At the same time, access and outreach do not always serve our communities equally. We see a clear gap between access and usability. While voting options has expanded, my research with community partners here found that more than half of Asian immigrant voters report difficulty understanding even translated ballots. And while vote by mail has helped increase participation, many voters, especially older voters, continue to rely on in-person voting and vote centers with trusted in-language support. What this tells us is that access alone is not enough. Voting systems are most effective when they reflect how communities actually navigate these elections. And with that, I'd like to invite Shakeel Syed from the South Asian Network to ask the next question.
At the South Asian Network, we work closely with immigrant communities across Southern California to support civic engagement and access to essential services, including helping community members navigate the voting process in multiple languages. California has expanded access to voting through measures like vote by mail, early voting, and voting centers, which have helped increase participation among diverse communities. At the same time, however, many voters, particularly those who rely on language access or in-person support, still face barriers in navigating the voting process. My question to you is, how would you ensure that existing voting systems, including vote by mails and voting centers, are not only maintained but effectively implemented, particularly for communities that rely on language access and in-person support? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move into candidate responses, of which everyone will get 90 seconds to respond. And here's the order of this round. Candidate Villaragosa, Candidate Thurmond, Candidate Steyer, Candidate Yee and Candidate Becerra. Please, Candidate Villaragoisa.
I'm here because there's a Voting Rights Act. I'm here because there's a Civil Rights Act. And early on, as an activist, and I started out at 15 years old in the farm worker boycott, in the Chicano movement, the Third World Coalition at UCLA, and then president of the ACLU, and I could tell you that voting rights has always been top of mind. I worked with Southwest Voter Registration Project, and in 1 year, we did 50,000 voter registrations. I believe that language access, voting rights are an absolute priority for the next governor, particularly with Donald Trump doing everything he can to eviscerate our voting strength. I will challenge them in the courts, working with the Attorney General. I will work to make sure at the ballot box we understand that voting rights are at stake. I will help to build that movement. Everybody, you want to defend democracy? You want to protect voting rights? We got to build a movement. Who better to do that than someone who came out of the civil rights movement? Someone who has spent his entire life fighting for civil rights and civil liberties. So as governor, we'll make voting rights and protecting our democracy our #1 priority.
Thank you, Candidate Thurmond.
I'll tell you one thing, as governor, I will never ask you to produce a birth certificate when you say that you want to vote. We will fight against those who are trying to block access. I'm 57 years old, and I never thought in my lifetime I would still hear people trying to block our access to voting. And the reason that they're doing it is because that they know, by and large, we are not voting for them. And so we must escalate our efforts to protect the right to vote. Our ancestors, in many cases, died for the right to vote. And what we can do is make sure that we educate our communities and provide the supports that they need to do even the informal things that we do, organizing driving caravans, making sure that we organize house parties. As your governor, I will invest in programs that give nonprofits the funding that they need to organize voter registration in our communities, to hire organizers who speak the languages of the communities that we serve, who can go door to door to door to door. Those trusted messengers who can come to your door and say, hola, buenos dias, nehoma, whatever the languages that they're speaking, that they will see a trusted messenger to help them prepare. We've done this already. We've created early voting registration for our high school students. I even sponsored legislation to allow high school students to vote in our school board elections. We will create more and more access and protect your votes.
Thank you. Candidate Steyer.
So obviously, democracy is at risk in 2026. The President of the United States and his Donald Trump and his gang want to take away democracy for the exact reason that Tony Thurmond just said, because they think they're going to lose. And they're right, they are going to lose. But before we get to that, I want to talk for a second about the people in this community by starting by saying it's not one community. And when we registered 1.2 million Californians, we worked through the groups for every community because we understand different languages, different cultures, different communities. We need to disaggregate this group, which is important that you aggregate for political purposes, but when we go out to communities, we need to disaggregate and work through the people that we work through to register young people and to turn them out to vote. Second thing is language access. In 2026, the technology is here to deal with language on a real-time basis. We should be using that so everybody feels comfortable. No question about it. But let's get back to democracy for a second. I expect the President of the United States to use his Gestapo, which they call ICE, to try and prevent people from voting. We are going to have to be organized about this. We are going to have to stand up to it. I think we'll get a chance later. We have a total policy for how we should be handling ICE legally. I am for abolishing them, but we're going to actually have to address this in 2026 because the only way they're going to win this election is by cheating, and they know it.
Thank you. Candidate Yee.
Let me start by just saying that, our democracy is only as strong as the ability of each and every one of us to participate in it fully. And that means everyone from my 103-year-old mother to the newly registered voter, just ready to graduate from high school. And voter education is key to this. But what's even more key is how we do voter education. And as your next governor, this is about recognizing the great diversity in our state. That how we do voter education in the AANHPI community is going to look different than how we do voter education in other communities. We have got to really understand that when we set policy at the state level, that we recognize the realities of what communities are experiencing on the ground. To do voter education through house parties, that's how we congregate, that's how we gather. That's how we meet up with family, friends, and trusted people we trust in our lives. But to look at how when we are doing voter education, we also know that we are letting people understand in our communities that we're a target. We're a target because people want to suppress our vote. And the best way to suppress our vote is through misinformation about who can vote, about how to vote, about when to vote. We've seen it. We've seen it. And so as your next governor, this is going to be about recognizing that there is no one-size-fits-all in terms of how we continue to uplift this democracy. It looks very different within our own community, and these are the policies that we have to really set forth. So let's just come together and be sure that we're advocating for that.
Candidate Becerra.
First, I think it's important to say, I think all of us as candidates are committed to protect the right to vote. And that's important because if one of us were unwilling, we would know that they should not have an opportunity to become governor. You need to have someone who will champion the right to vote. And so fortunately, we have candidates who are willing to do that on the Democratic side. Let me tell you what I've done, not as a governor, but as the Attorney General. Remember 2020, Republicans, conservatives started attacking the drop boxes where you could drop off your ballot ahead of the date of election. They started burning them and destroying them. We had to go after them. As Attorney General, we went after them and told them, we are prosecuting you if we find you if you try to do that, because no one should be tampering with the right to vote. And if you have to drop your ballot off at a drop box because you can't be available on election day, then we're going to fight to make sure you have that right. Remember, during Trump's first term, he tried to deny immigrants the ability to be counted in the census, which would impact California dramatically and lower the amount of money we'd get back in our taxes that we spend and send over to Washington, D.C. I had to sue Donald Trump to keep him from trying to have a census that would not count our immigrant populations. As a Secretary of Health and Human Services, I had one key task to make sure during the COVID pandemic, I was able to get vaccines, treatments, all the things that you needed to everyone, not just those who could afford it. We made it clear everyone would have access to the vaccines, and that now means that when it comes to voting, everyone must have the right to vote.
Thank you. We'll now move on to our next section on small business. Small businesses are a critical part of California's economy and local communities. Many are small, family-run operations with limited capacity, navigating rising costs, and an increasingly complex set of requirements. For some business owners, especially those who are immigrant, limited English proficient, or operating with limited access to capital and support networks, accessing resources and keeping up with changes can be challenging in practice. With that, I would like to invite James Choi, owner of Cafe Dulce based in Little Tokyo, Los Angeles, to ask the next question.
Thank you guys so much for being here. I think it's an understatement to say that it's difficult to be a small business in California. With constantly increasing rising costs, new laws and regulations with no regulations ever being sunsetted, it often, and then we often don't have the time or resources to fully navigate everything. Even when support exists, it can be difficult to access or understand and practice, and it often feels like businesses are being penalized while trying to do the right thing. What will you do to ensure that the policies are not only supportive in intent and don't eventually harm the businesses, but actually workable in practice for small businesses like ours? Thank you.
Thank you. For the order of this next section, we're going to start with Candidate Thurmond, then Candidate Steyer, Candidate Becerra, Candidate Villaraigosa, and Candidate Yee. 90 seconds. We'll start with Candidate Thurmond.
The first thing that we need to do is listen to our business community about what the barriers have been so that we can remove those barriers and And from the gauge of the audience applause for your business, sir, we're going to be coming to your restaurant for our first listening session. We have to, change the time it takes to permit. We have to cut regulations. I support a business where every time I go in, the water company is digging. There are barriers. You can't park in front of the business. And how can any business thrive in these environments? And so we have to work from a state level to get every local municipality to support our local businesses. As governor, I will make sure that we're providing low interest to no interest loans for small businesses to help them to upgrade their facilities. Many of our small businesses get hit with environmental notices about issues that have been there since even before their business existed, and then no help to address it, and no language services to host those individuals who are calling them. I've had this experience where I've had to call for my friend John Lee to help him as he's navigating the complications of what's happening to his business. There's also billions of dollars that goes out from every single state agency in our state. And we're not seeing those dollars go to minority contractors and women businesses and veteran businesses. And as governor, I'll make sure that those dollars will go to the companies that are supporting us, that will have local business control. We will provide the resources to help our businesses attract more businesses and take care of their facilities.
Candidate Steyer.
So I think I'm the only entrepreneur on this stage. Not true? Okay. I'm one of only 3 entrepreneurs on this stage. But I actually did this. I went into a room by myself and had to start, so I know exactly what it looks like. And everybody's going to talk about overregulation, and it's true. There is overregulation. It's very expensive. It's very cumbersome. It's a real prevention for people being comfortable about starting a business. That is absolutely true. Secondly, access to finance, particularly if you're not comfortable in English, going to normal commercial banks is hard, and that's why we started a nonprofit community bank to lend money, not just for low-income housing, for the businesses that didn't have access to capital from the normal things, and that's in the billions of dollars at this point. But I want to talk about the biggest thing that makes it hard to run a business in California, and that's the overall cost. I started by saying to you guys, our campaign is all about costs. Healthcare costs, yeah, absolutely incredible. Electricity costs, 3 times Texas. The ability, housing costs get flown through to the employees that you want to hire who have to be able to live here. So when I say I'm going to drive down costs, that's the point of our campaign, so that working people can afford to live in California. It's so that you can also afford to start a business, so that the costs don't kill you. Yeah, we got to get the regulations right. Yes, we have to get access to capital. But the truth is we need to drive down costs so the people in this community can start businesses and prosper.
Candidate Becerra.
I think the most important thing that we can do for our small businesses, give you a seat at the table. We know the big businesses know how to get a seat at the table, but can you, a small business, get a seat at that table? How do we make it so that disadvantaged business owners and those small businesses that are trying to just make it through and always having to go through the jungle of the big guys, how can we ensure that their voice is heard? Ensure them a seat at the table. And having represented this area where there are so many small businesses, I represented Chinatown, Little Tokyo, Koreatown, historic Filipino town, Thai town. You get to work with all these folks. Pico Union, where all the Latino small business, Central American businesses are. You get to see the difficulty they face in navigating. So we will make sure you have a seat at the table, most importantly. Secondly, capital. The SBA just is now denying immigrant business owners access to the SBA loan program. That is perhaps the worst thing we can do, because most of these small family-owned operations need a little bit of capital. Once they have it, they thrive. We have to stop that. One-stop shop. It has to be that you don't have to go to 4 different agencies to get approval for your business license, that you can go forward with your business. One-stop shopping, streamline this so you can go forward. But most of all, remember, you will have a seat at the table, because you're the one that created jobs. You're the one that created prosperity in your community. We need you at that table.
Candidate Villaragoisa.
This is the worst state to do business in the United States of America. Not making it up. We got more regulations in this state than any state by a lot, even other blue states. Look at the PPIC study on overregulation in California. Look, when I was mayor, I said, we don't see enough people of color doing contracting with the city of Los Angeles. The MBOC, if you remember, Charlie, the Minority Business Opportunity Center, we were 33 in the country. By the time I left, we were #1. We gave people access to capital. We made sure that everybody's contracting with LA. Well, the next governor's gonna have to do the same thing. Anybody have a small business here? Raise your hand. Do you know PAGA? Private Attorney General? Come on, everybody. Killing business across the board. We're gonna have to cut regulations for small business. We treat small business like we do multinational corporations, and you can't afford it. So I'm honored to have the LBA, the Latin Business Association's endorsement, and I have because they know that we need somebody with a record. Small business is the lifeblood of many of the ethnic communities that make up this town and this state. And we've got to understand that, grow that. That's the only way we're going to deal with the revenue issues that we have. Growing our businesses, it starts with small business. Thank you.
Candidate Yee.
We have all heard too many times how small businesses are the backbone of our economy. And I think it's time to actually respect small businesses as being the backbone of our economy. You know, when we think about all of the pressures that small businesses have today, and look, I'm going to go back to my mom because she reminds me of this all the time. They had a laundry and dry cleaning business for 30 years, raised 6 kids, sacrificed, worked really hard. All 6 of us got to go to college. That's the dream that continues to guide my work in terms of what I believe California can still be. But why that was possible, and she tells me today, if your dad and I were in business today, we'd never make it. We'd never make it. But it's not just about the costs that you've heard about here with my colleagues, but we're also a global economy. We're affected by tariff policy. We're affected when there are supply chain issues. So I want to talk about the opportunities in terms of for small businesses. So many API and NHPI businesses are those that really operate on really small margins, retail, restaurants, personal care services, but there are so many opportunities to uplift this community in terms of other types of work. In the healthcare industry, which is going to be, for an aging population, really important that we have small businesses helping in that industry. Climate technology, we're going to deal with climate change because we have entrepreneurs that can push out climate technology. So we have opportunities as well, but let's get those regulations under control, but also talk about how we uplift more opportunities for our community.
Thank you. We'll now move into our next related section on affordability and the economy. Across California, the cost of living continues to rise, with housing, healthcare, and education placing increasing pressures on our households. Many families are balancing multiple costs at home and at once. Housing alone consumes a significant share of income for many renters, and healthcare and education expenses often compete with our basic needs. For many Asian American and Pacific Island communities, these pressures are especially acute, particularly for communities with multi-generational households or limited access to stable housing and resources. And they're shaping real decisions about whether families can even stay here in our great state of California. So with that, I'd like to invite Aki Versosa Soriano from the Filipino Worker Center to ask the next question.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. Again, I'm Aki Soriano Versosa, Director of the Filipino Worker Center, and we work with workers and families across California. We're doing everything they can to stay, but are increasingly being pushed out by the rising costs of housing, healthcare, and everyday living expenses. Many people want to stay in California because of their communities, their work, and their connection to the state. But affordability is making that more difficult, especially immigrant families, low-wage workers, many who are experiencing wage theft, and those navigating systems in different languages. So as governor, how, and the detail matters, right? How would you approach affordability in a way that allows communities like ours not just to get by, but to stay and build a future here?
Thank you. We'll go through our response order, and candidates will have 90 seconds each. Candidate Steyer, followed by Candidate Becerra, Candidate Yee, Candidate Thurmond, and Candidate Villaraigosa. We'll start with Candidate Steyer.
So I did start by saying that Californians can't afford to live in California anymore. And that's the number one issue for the people of this state. And I would like to say that covering housing, healthcare, electricity, gas prices, and food in 90 seconds is a challenge, but I'm going to give it a shot. The number one is housing. And you should know it's both renting and building. Long term, we need to build a lot more houses. It's got a lot of problems to it, but it's absolutely urgent. In the short run, in terms of rent, I would have rent be deductible the way mortgage interest is deductible, so we make it even so renters can afford to pay the rent. And I would control rent spikes, because obviously government failure, meaning that we're not building enough housing, which makes rent go up a lot more than people's income go up, is a huge government failure. We need a governmental response. But I'm for taking away the electric monopolies, monopoly power. That's going to take more than 90 seconds. I am for single-payer healthcare, because healthcare is eating up every family, every small business, and it's eating up the state of California as well. We're looking at huge gas spikes because of this stupid war that Donald Trump started. It's pouring $70 billion of profit into his oil company supporters. I would put it on a windfall profits tax. It's already permitted. I'd put it on, and we're going to wait and see food prices. This is the number one issue. I'm all over it.
Thank you. Candidate Becerra.
So, Aki, first I want to address the question about wage theft. When I was Attorney General, I created a Workers' Rights Bureau because we saw so much wage theft occurring, mostly with low-income workers, the janitors, the people who clean our buildings all the time, the people who are taking care of our families. They were always getting ripped off. So I created a Workers' Rights Bureau to not only supplement what the local district attorneys were supposed to do, but to go after ourselves, because some of these operations were enterprises that crossed over jurisdictions. So we absolutely have to do that, because if you work hard, you deserve to get paid for what you did. But let me now tackle in a short amount of time, and I have this list. I know I'm not going to get through it. First, because the rates have gone up, whether it's your owner's insurance or whether it is utility rates, my first 100 days, I will declare a state of emergency. I will freeze home insurance, property insurance policies, and I will freeze utility rate increases, so we can have that 120 days with the legislature to go in and find out why the rates are going up so much. And if there's no explanation, we bring them back down. Secondly, we're going to build. Everyone has talked about how we need to build. I don't have time to go into it, but obviously we need to reduce the pressure on those who are trying to buy or rent. Third, down payment assistance. So many of you are renting, you're essentially paying a mortgage, but you don't own the place. All you lack is a down payment. I'm going to expand down payment programs so you can become the owner, not the renter. We can do this together, but working families must be the ones we benefit.
Thank you. Candidate Yee.
Thank you. I also want to address the wage theft issue. And as governor, I'm going to be sure we have teeth in our enforcement. The reason that employers get by with this is because they know the state of California is not looking. And by the time we actually go into legal avenues to try to pursue recovery of wages, they're long gone. And so there has to be a constant presence. Look, with affordability, I agree, we're all going to be in pretty much agreement about what we need to do. But with respect to housing, one of the things that I do want to bring back is redevelopment, because it expands how we can build and expands the options of what we can build, so that in every area of the state where we have areas that need improvement, we're not talking about building from the ground up, but we can do rehab and reuse and adaptive reuse to get more units online quicker. We have to have rent stabilization. We should not be disrupting our communities because people can't afford to stay in it and people are coming and going. We need to really preserve that sense of community. And with respect to electricity, I'm going to have a CPUC that's going to be accountable and to exercise a full audit authority to be sure that every rate increase that they're approving, we're getting the benefits of it. It may be, because we haven't had audits of every rate increase, that you all are owed a refund as ratepayers. And so we need to be sure that they are using those dollars wisely. And lastly, with respect to insurance, this is important. I don't like this president any more than probably most people in this room, but we have to have national cooperation to stand up a national reinsurance program so that our FAIR plan does not go under, so we can bring these private policies back into the private market and have competitive rates.
Thank you. Candidate Thurmond.
Thank you, Aki. Listen, while the president is off giving his billionaire friends their tax credits, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to give all of you a tax credit so that working people and middle-class people have more money in your pocket every month to pay more for the rising costs of gas and groceries and housing. My plan is to build 2 million housing units in this state using the surplus property that exists in every single county of this state. Our school districts own surplus property that is ready for development right now. And yes, I will pass a single-payer health care program, and when I'm governor, I will restore universal health care for undocumented immigrants in our state so no one has to go to the emergency room to get care. Now listen, everyone's going to tell you what they're going to do on affordability, and there are a lot of great people on this stage, but what I implore you to think about is that you should elect someone who demonstrates experience like I've described, 18 years of building housing, creating jobs, fighting for the people, someone who has a very specific plan. As I talked to you about the tax credit, I talked to you about the housing plans that we will have, and someone who has the lived experience of Californians who are struggling every single day, who are working 2 and 3 jobs. And I'm not a billionaire, but I'm somebody who knows how to work hard. I'm somebody who started out working minimum wage jobs in fast food, in restaurants. I started a small business. It was a painting company, and I know what it is to make a payroll, and I've never missed a payroll. And I'm asking you to elect someone who works a night job and has worked 2 jobs like most Californians to make ends meet like you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, Candidate Villaragoisa.
First of all, let me just say that with respect to wage theft, when I was Speaker of the Assembly, I expanded the Department of Industrial Relations to go after wage theft. Since then, they've made cuts in that department. We're going to restore them. I agree with some of my colleagues on a rental tax credit. If you can get a credit for having a home, you ought to be able to do one for renters. But look, if you want to address the crisis in housing, we got to build more. When I was mayor, remember this, downtown had 20,000 units. By the time I left, it was 60,000 units. I built more market rate, more workforce, more affordable, and more homeless housing in 8 years than they did in the 12 years before that. What do we need to do to get there? Cut red tape, streamline CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, which allows you to sue from Richmond, Virginia for a project in Richmond, California. Address the fact that we do need first-time buyer assistance, and there's a initiative on the ballot right now that we all need support. No taxpayer obligations, and it will build 100 to 150,000 units throughout this state for first-time home buyers. And finally, let's talk about gas prices. The highest gas prices in the United States. Why? Because we overregulate refineries. If we close one more refinery, according to USC, gas prices are going to $8.75 a gallon. We've got to stop that.
Thank you. We'll now move on to our next section on healthcare. Across California, rising healthcare costs and changes in coverage are making it harder for families to access and maintain care. For many Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, these challenges are compounded by language barriers, gaps in culturally responsive care, and even uneven access across different communities, as well as the complexity of navigating eligibility and also enrollment systems. Community-based organizations often play a critical role in helping individuals access care and stay connected to services, especially when systems are difficult to navigate. With that, I'd like to invite Savantni Lee from Orange County Asian and Pacific Islander Community Alliance to ask the next question.
At Ocapica, we help individuals navigate enrollment, coverage, and ongoing care. And we see firsthand how rising costs and policy changes can quickly disrupt access, especially for those relying on public programs or needing language support. For many families, the challenge isn't just getting coverage, but keeping it, affording care, and avoiding medical debt. From a statewide leadership perspective, how would you ensure accountability across the healthcare system, including public programs, providers, and insurers, so that care remains accessible, costs are manageable, and families are not pushed into debt while trying to stay healthy?
All right. The order for this set of questions will start with Candidate Yee, then Candidate Thurmond, Candidate Villaragosa, Candidate Becerra, and then Candidate Steyer. Candidate Yee.
Thank you. You know, when we talk about affordability, obviously healthcare top of mind for so many people, as well as housing. When healthcare costs are rising beyond the rate of inflation, that's something to be very, very concerned about. You know, a couple things that I just want to say about healthcare, and I think a lot of lessons learned from the COVID pandemic. And that is when we talk about how people access healthcare, we have to be mindful about how people get information about healthcare. And so being sure that as the state level and as governor, again, recognizing the great diversity of our state, that we have to recognize that how people get information is not through the usual sources, not through the formal channels. And so technical assistance, in my mind, is going to be about how we ground community resources for people to be able to get the most trusted information and get access to care. When I look at how we keep costs manageable, look, we're facing some really looming cuts from HR 1 coming from the federal government. And one of the ways that we have to do better is also wringing out the inefficiencies of our healthcare system. We've got to bring back the independent authority to audit Medi-Cal because we know that there is fraud in that program, not from the people who use the program, from people who actually pretend to be providers of the program and submitting fraudulent claims. We also need to be sure that we're funding our third-party liability program because insurance companies should not be looking to Medi-Cal to pay the bills that they're responsible for. And lastly, let's grow the healthcare workforce. We've got disparities in this community. Let's be sure that the people who are taking care of our community know what our community needs and build up that workforce.
Thank you. Candidate Thurmond.
You know, my brother was 35 years old when he lost his job. He lost his insurance, and at the same time, he'd been diagnosed with a rare liver disorder. He did not smoke, he did not drink. And because he lost his insurance, he ultimately lost his life at the time when he needed health insurance the most. No one should lose their life because they don't have access to health insurance. And that's why, as governor, I will implement a single-payer healthcare system. Healthcare is a right. And there are companies that are making so much money off of healthcare. That is the real threat. Every employer should be providing healthcare, but these big companies that refuse to pay, even though they're making record profits, we have to hold them accountable. Even the nonprofits that make billions by investing in systems that hurt our immigrant communities, they have to be held accountable, and I intend to do that. I believe I'm the only candidate on the stage who has endorsed the billionaire tax so that we have more money to offset the closures of our hospitals and our medical centers all throughout the state. We have to reverse the impacts of, they call it the big, beautiful bill. I call it the big, ugly bill because it is ugly in what it does. It kicks people off of Medicaid and Medi-Cal. It says that you have to pay more in your premiums for the Affordable Care Act. We're going to elect another Congress that's going to help us reverse those items. We're going to elect the new president, Donald Trump. We're coming for you, and we're going to make sure that we provide health care for everyone in this state because health care is a right.
Thank you. Candidate Villaraigosa.
I had a congenital tumor when I was born, and by 15, I was paralyzed from the waist down. My mother had to quit her job to help to pay for the surgeries that I had. I can tell you this, healthcare is a right, not a privilege. The only issue should be, how do we get there? I don't support single payer for this reason. You need, it's a $500 billion price tag. We have a $300 million plus budget, and we're looking at $18 to $35 billion in cuts in the next year. So what can we do? We can drive down costs. I agree. Did you see the newspaper? $264 million fraud, one program alone in hospice care. We got to take on fraud and abuse, but we also got to drive down costs. So while I don't agree that, we should do single payer, I do believe in a public option. We need a public entity providing insurance, helping to drive down the cost of insurance in this state. We also need to make sure that the people who are been eviscerated, 2 million people off of Medi-Cal and the covered California folks, that they do have that health care. I believe the undocumented should be covered because we know if they're not, we're all going to get sicker, and we already pay for it, and it's called emergency care.
Candidate Becerra.
we treat healthcare as if it were a commodity, that you could buy it at a grocery store shelf one day, and if it goes up too much, well, you don't eat it. When your child is sick, you're going to get care. You may not have insurance, you may not have money, and you'll probably try every remedy you can. You'll wait as long as you can. But when your child is really ailing, you will go to the hospital. But by the time you go to the hospital, you're now entering through the most expensive doors in healthcare, the emergency room. Who pays? Well, those families pay because they probably lose most of their whatever they had socked away to maybe buy a house or to pay for college. No, they had to use it for the medical bill, and it won't pay the medical bill completely. Guess who else pays? You and me, the taxpayers. And so it is stupid to say people should be denied health care. So this is what I'm going to do. Donald Trump, we're not taking a knee. You took $1 trillion out of health care. Makes no difference. If you have Medi-Cal, you're not going to lose it. On my watch, the state of California will be the backstop on healthcare. We're marching towards universal coverage for people in California, not going backwards. And that means the undocumented as well. 2, the community health centers. People here know this. The community health centers for so many families are the frontline source of care, not the hospitals, the community health centers. I put more money into community health centers than any Secretary of Health and Human Service ever before. We'll do that again. And finally, let me just say this. We're going to move towards home care so you can take care of your loved one at home, not in an institution.
Candidate Steyer.
So we've heard everybody on this stage say healthcare is a right, and healthcare is a right. And healthcare is a right for everybody in California. And they've talked about how we're going to pay for it. But we really do need revenue because H.R. 1 does kick 1 to 3 million people off Medi-Cal, and we're going to have to pick up the tab. On day 1 as governor, I will call a special election to close a big corporate real estate tax loophole worth $20 billion so we can fill the gap and actually balance our budget. Because healthcare is eating us up. I said this before, it just keeps escalating. I talked to somebody yesterday whose healthcare went up 12% last year. People are dropping their healthcare insurance so they can make their budgets at the end of the month. We can't have this. We need the money to pay for healthcare in the short run. But if you look at the numbers, you can see it's not going to stop eating us up. I totally agree with Betty. We should do a much better job in terms of costs. But the truth is, the reason we have to go to single payer is single payer costs half as much for the same health care. That's what the numbers are all over the world. Antonio's right. It'll be a very complicated, difficult thing, and we'll need Washington to help us. It'll be at least 3 years. But the truth is, we don't have a choice but to go to single payer because otherwise, not only is every family going to go bust, so is the state of California.
Thank you. We'll now move to our next section on immigration. Immigration has shaped California for generations and continues to be central to the state's future. For many families, arriving in California is not a single moment, but an ongoing process that shapes access to healthcare, housing, education, and economic opportunity. At the same time, navigating systems can be complex, especially for those facing language barriers or uncertainty around eligibility and protections. With that, I'd like to invite Chancey Mortarell from the Thai Community Development Center to ask the next question.
Thank you. At the Thai Community Development Center, we work with disadvantaged immigrant communities and help them navigate a wide range of immigration statuses, language barriers, and access to essential services. For many individuals and families, the challenge is not only federal immigration policy, but how state and local systems ensure they can access housing, healthcare, legal and social services, and economic opportunities. How would you ensure that California's systems are responsive to the realities of immigrant and migrant communities so that people are able to navigate systems effectively and are not left out due to complexity, language barriers, or gaps in implementation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chancey. We'll move forward to the candidate responses, which will be 90 seconds each. We'll start with the following order: Candidate Becerra, Candidate Villaraigosa, Candidate Steyer, Candidate Thurmond, followed by Candidate Yee. And we'll start with Candidate Becerra.
Donald Trump, the first time he was president, tried to, as I told you before, eliminate the DACA program. We fought him and we beat him. Donald Trump tried to get our law enforcement to do immigration raids with him. We fought him and we beat him. Donald Trump is today violating the law, having his ICE agents do things that they're not allowed to do because it's not immigration enforcement. It's going after anyone they look at and they think they can go after. We're going to stop that immediately because we have a right to enforce the Constitution, even though Donald Trump won't. We also have to make sure that we protect the interests of our families every day. That's why when I was Secretary of Health and Human Services, it didn't make any difference to me what your status was, what your income was, where you lived. You were going to get a vaccine, and you were not going to get charged one penny to have access to that vaccine or to Paxlovid. We wanted to make sure you were healthy. That's why we opened up more community health centers, because we know so many of the immigrant community are in communities where there are very few health centers that really provide for them. And so we built up the community health centers. We're going to make sure that schools offer you an education that's not just good for your K through 12 and it's the 3 R's, but it's also multicultural, it is bilingual and bicultural so that you can learn. And the people who should be there as your health providers, as your teachers, should be people that look like you. And so we'll do much, much more to make sure people feel comfortable, respected, and they have the confidence that the people that are working with them really care about them.
Thank you. Candidate Villaragoisa.
I'm the son of an immigrant on my father's side who left when I was 5. My grandpa came here with a shirt on his back and a dream 120-odd years ago. Immigrants have built this country. And yet the first immigration laws were targeting Chinese and Japanese, the first ones. So when they say, my people came here the right way, they're lying. We didn't have rules back then except for the Chinese and the Japanese. Later in the 20s, they included Latinos. We've looked at these raids, and where are they targeting everybody? There are a lot of people that are undocumented in this country, and they come from every corner of the earth. But they're targeting Latinos and Asians. We know that disproportionately, and we've got to say no. We've got to provide the opportunities for them. They have businesses. Their kids are graduating, cum laude. You worked in your mom's laundry shop and got a great education. These are the best and the brightest, and we've got to stand up for them. We've got to address the fact that they need language access. We need to address the fact that they need health care. Their kids deserve a great education. And as we all know, safety in those neighborhoods are important because disproportionately, those are the communities that are targeted, have the most unsafe communities. I will do that as your next governor. I've done it my whole life.
Thank you. Candidate Steyer.
I mean, immigrants built California. Immigrants are the backbone of California. We need more immigration, and we're incredibly lucky that we're on the west coast of California, so we're Asia-facing. We need more people to come here to build this state the way they have for the last couple hundred years. And let me say this, in terms of serving immigrant families, right now what we need to do is be protecting immigrant families from ICE. This is a criminal organization that is built to terrorize and harm immigrants, and we need to stop them. Now, I've said I'd abolish ICE, and I would, because it is a criminal organization, and you can't reform criminal organizations. We need immigrant rights, immigrant services, but this is an organization to be gone. But unfortunately, the governor of California, as people have mentioned to me, cannot get rid of ICE with the stroke of a pen. So here's what we need to do. We need to prosecute them for racial profiling. It's illegal. We need to prosecute them for violence against Californians, including the people who send them. We need to investigate their detention centers because they're trying to hide them and prevent people understanding what's going on there. We need a much expanded legal defense fund for people who've been kidnapped or for people who are under threat of deportation. And we need a huge Know Your Rights campaign so we can all stand up to ICE. This is a question of our society coming together to protect people who are being targeted by a criminal organization. That's what we need to do, and I will do it as governor.
Thank you. Candidate Thurmond.
As I shared in my opening, I'm the grandson and son of immigrants, and I believe that a better way is possible for how we support those who have supported our community. Think about those immigrant communities who pay into Social Security, and they cannot draw down on those dollars. Everything about this president's immigration policy is destroying everything that we care about. The tariffs, our immigration policy is destroying agriculture. It is destroying hospitality. It is destroying those who work in construction. And, you know, ICE has to be abolished because when the president says that ICE is here to protect us, look at who is being detained. Those who work as childcare workers, those who work as farm workers, we don't need protection from them. They're investing in our economy, billions. And so we need to create policies at the state level that protect those, like the ones that I talked to you about, to keep ICE out of our schools. We have 10,000 schools in the state. My legislation has kept ICE out of the schools simply by reminding our schools that they never have to give any information to any ICE agent, and they don't have to let them in unless they have a judicial warrant. My legislation that I helped to pass keeps ICE out of the hospital workers. It is shameless that they want you to be afraid to even go see a doctor and force you to go to the emergency room. My latest legislation puts a tax on any company that operates an ICE detention center. There are 7 ICE detention centers in California. They're trying to make money off of fear-mongering in our state. We won't let that happen. We'll create a path to citizenship for our immigrant families in the state of California.
Thank you. Lastly, Candidate Yee.
Thank you. I want to address the question about how we move our community forward. I don't think you'll see any disagreement among all of us here on the stage in terms of what we need to do to stand up against ICE. But what I will say about this community, I've been doing this work for almost 4 decades in public service. And the one barrier, you've heard it through every question that we've had today, language barriers. Why hasn't this been addressed? My father died at 63 years old from kidney failure. Never had health insurance because he couldn't afford it. But he also didn't have language proficiency in all the 63 years of his life in English. And when I think about why we are still a generation later dealing with this is beyond me. And so I say to all the policymakers, our legislators, our congressional members, the next governor, let's get to the business of really tackling language access, because it is the frontline barrier for all of us and our families. But more importantly, in terms of navigation, who best to navigate the barriers than the people facing the barriers? We need you to come in and actually help government navigate how we get to good outcomes for our communities. Because I, for one, am tired of wasting money. I was your controller. This is how we waste money. This is not a one-size-fits-all where we dictate from Sacramento. This is about how communities get better outcomes so that they can actually thrive and have a future where they can do better. And that's my vision for California for all of our communities.
Thank you. Our next question focuses on leadership and representation, and I will be asking the question. Across California, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islander communities are deeply engaged in shaping our state. At the same time, representation and decision-making roles across boards, commissions, and state leadership doesn't always reflect the full diversity of our communities. Ensuring representation across government is not only about visibility, but it's also about bringing lived experiences into how the decisions are made. That said, my question for you is, how would you ensure that Asian American, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islander communities are meaningfully included in the decision-making roles, including appointments to boards and commissions and leadership within state agency, so that governance reflects the full diversity of California, including immigrant, working class, and Pacific Islander communities that are oftentimes far too underrepresented? Next, I'm going to go over the order in which the candidates will respond. We're going to start with Candidate Villaraigosa, Candidate Steyer, and just a note that Candidate Thurmond had to leave, and so we appreciate his time joining us for the forum today. After Candidate Steyer, it's going to be Candidate Yee, and then lastly, Candidate Becerra. We're going to start with Candidate Villaraigosa. 90 seconds.
I think I have 10 people working on staff. 9 of them are of color. 5 of them are Asian Pacific Islander or Southeast Asian. I said when I was mayor, LA was 70% of color. We had never had more than 40% of color as appointments and as staff. When I was mayor, I said that's got to stop, because I knew that when you open up the door for one of us, the role of the first is to open up the door for the rest. And that didn't just mean Latinos, because everybody was saying we just elected a Latino. It meant everybody. I had about 14% API, 22% Black, 45% or so Latino. I was focused on opening up the door for all of us. I will do that as governor. Why? It's important for us to have, I was better for it. When you have people from every community, you're better. Today at the state, I bet you there's not more than, in a state where there's 60% of color, probably not more than 40% of color in terms, if that, in terms of appointments. We've got to change that. I promise you, I get elected governor, I'm going to open up the door to every community, including all the API communities here.
Thank you. Candidate Steyer.
So the superpower of California is the people of California. And we have the Rainbow Coalition. And that is one of the great glories of this state. But in addition, all of the research says that diverse groups make better decisions every time. So absolutely, it's just and right, and you need to make sure in every organization that it's a diverse group of people that reflects the community that you're trying to serve. It also turns out it's much smarter, that the decisions are better, that the effectiveness is higher. So let me talk about what we've done. I mean, if you look at our bank, which is all over this state, my wife, Kat, and I, who started the bank, are probably the only white people. If you look at the organization in Sacramento, which is 20 people, which have been working on every progressive policy in this state for 11 years, it's incredibly diverse, including, of course, the people from this room. If you look at our campaign, it's incredibly diverse. Everyone on this stage is going to promise you that they're going to do this, and I think they are. I absolutely believe it. But I also want to say this. It's the right thing to do. It's the reason California is successful. It's the reason this is an interesting, wonderful state. So as opposed to saying, I'm going to do this, no, this is a great thing to do. Let's love the fact that we're the most diverse state in the country.
Candidate Yee.
So one of the things that has guided me throughout my public service career is this whole notion of proximate leadership. That really the role of any one of us in public service is to really help improve our communities and to uplift our communities. And how best to do that but to really be engaged with the people who are really undergoing the daily lived experiences of challenges, that the role of government has such a huge part to play. So this, with respect to appointments, that's the floor. That's the floor. It's what we do with the rest of the community that we're going to bring these leaders in from. And I have a philosophy in terms of how I govern. And that is, I've got one foot squarely in the office in which I'm serving, and the other foot is always in the community. And if they're moving in tandem, we're probably delivering something good for the community. We never forget from where we come. And more importantly, it's about just doing the right thing. I mentioned earlier, as your controller, I saw where the dollars went, and I saw a lot of waste. I saw a lot of waste. And when we are able to actually be better informed about the issues to be solved, when we are able to look at not always having to fit everything into a square peg and a round hole in terms of this is how we've always done it as government, when we can be innovative in terms of how we get information and resources out to our diverse communities, this is how we succeed. We have to focus on outcomes, not inputs, but who provides the input is going to matter, and I'll be sure that this community has a significant seat at the table. Thank you.
Candidate Becerra.
Again, I think you were fortunate that at least as Democrats, we all agree that if you're going to govern, you have to govern for everyone you represent. And you can't do that well if you don't have the diversity of California represented. My very first hire when I became elected was a gentleman named David Kim, who ultimately became the Secretary of Transportation here in the state of California. David and I got to know each other when I worked for State Senator Art Torres. He worked for State Senator Roberti, the Senate Pro Tem. And I said to him, David, if I win this race for Assembly, you're my first hire. And he ran my Sacramento office. From that point forward, especially because in my congressional district, as I mentioned before, I essentially had most of the Asian Pacific, the AANHPI community in my congressional district. I always had representation from the various communities because we're not monolithic, right? You can't just say, well, I got someone who's Korean American and think that a lot of other communities are going to be happy. They want to make sure they're there as well. And so we had the diversity of my district in my team as in Congress. Same as AG, same as Secretary of Health and Human Services, because you begin to realize something. If you don't hire this diversity, you're missing the experience, the voice, and the future of what is California. We will have a diverse state representation when I'm governor, not because it's the moral thing to do, because economically, fiscally, it's the right thing to do if you want your state to remain the fourth largest economy in the world.
Thank you. Before we move to closing remarks, we want our candidates to take a moment to reflect on the conversation today before answering our last question. Throughout this forum, we've heard about the experiences and priorities of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities across issues including the environment, voting rights, small businesses, affordability, healthcare, and immigration. We also heard thoughtful responses from our candidates. And this is our last question. Based on what you've heard today, how will you commit to continuing to engage with our communities, to seek our input, and to incorporating these priorities into your approach to governing California, including how policies are developed and implemented? We'll go ahead and go over the order. We'll start with Candidate Yee, move to Candidate Becerra, Candidate Steyer, and then Candidate Villaragosa. Candidate Yee.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all of you, your attention this morning and for being here. And it's been an honor to be in the community here for this forum. You know, when I think about, just the future of our state, and particularly from my own community, just even sitting here, I'm thinking about even within our own community, the missing voices that weren't expressed today. I know a lot of our young people are really struggling right now, and I really do look at our young people as truly the future of our state. And so as I look at continuing my work in public service, and certainly as your next governor of California, this has to be a partnership. This has to be a partnership because we have just limited opportunities in terms of being able to provide better living conditions, quality of life for our community. We're going to be under attack by this president for 2 years that will overlap with the next governor's term. And we have to be the example, the model, the leadership of what is possible. And this community, I have always said, shows the rest of the state what's possible through your struggles, but also through your triumphs. And what we need to be able to do is to understand where we can continue to make investments. But I do want to highlight the young people because this is a very fraught time for many of our young people across all communities. And I want to be sure that we are bringing in their voices into government as well. Because if we can actually have their smarts and their input, we know we're solving for the long term. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to Candidate Becerra.
The best way I'll prove to you that I will remember you is to not wait for you to come to me, but I will go to you. That's what we did when it came to the COVID vaccines, because we saw what always happens, the disparities that were occurring, that the communities that were always left out were the ones that were not getting vaccinated well. So I told my team, we can't do it the old way. Rather than wait for them to come to us or to come to these big, large vaccination centers that we have at the stadiums, no, we got to go to them. And so we started going into communities where trusted voices were, whether it was the basketball coach or whether it was the beautician. We went where you were, and the result was we got rid of all those disparities that typically exist. So here's what I will tell you. When I was HHS secretary and the President Biden had to figure out how to move his White House initiative for AANHPI, I put up my hand and said, let us at HHS drive this. So the initiative, the White House initiative on AANHPI was based at HHS. That means we put personnel forward out of our money to fund the initiative. I was a co-chair along with Ambassador Catherine Tai from the U.S. Trade Representative's Office of that initiative. When I was a member of Congress, Congressman Mike Honda asked me to help out because the KPAC was growing big. So what I said is, Mike, we have to redo these bylaws because we're a big organization now. Every year that I was in Congress, 24 years, I was a member of KPAC and member of the executive committee. I'm not going to wait for you to come to me. I will go to you.
Thank you. Candidate Steyer.
So I would like to reiterate what Betty Yee said. This is a model community, a group of people who are succeeding overwhelmingly. And the fact that myth, and it's true, but it also covers up the struggle behind it. And I want to say, when I talk about costs and driving down costs, I'm talking about enabling the people of this community to thrive. I'm talking about enabling not just small businesses, but families to live the California dream, buy a house, have a great free public education, get health care as a right. That's the California dream, because by the way, we're living in the most beautiful place in the world. And I want to say, I'm not just want to enable the people of this community. To be honest, I want to take advantage of the people of this community because there is so much talent here. The idea of not including, not looking to, not putting in positions of leadership would be just plain stupid. But I want to say one more thing about this. We have in front of us today somebody from this community who has excelled in her entire career, who is an amazing representative of what people from this community can do, have done, and will do, and that's Betty Yee. Yeah, I think it's really important as we're here all together, and I know this is competitive, and I know this is supposed to be rough, but we need to remember that the people from this community, exactly like Betty Lee, don't just stand for success, but stand for real values that we should all respect. I love what that stands for.
Candidate Villaraigosa.
I grew up in Boyle Heights, and I remember my mother telling me about the Japanese relocation camps, the internment camps. My first opportunity to get involved in politics, I helped to start the Black Student Union and then the United Mexican American Students. When I was at UCLA, I was one of the leaders of the Third World Coalition. If you hear anybody describe me, almost always they'll say a coalition builder. I represented every community, which is why my staff looked like it did, and my appointments. And again, I want you to remember, nobody before me ever had the kind of representation I did. So what are we going to do? We're going to come into every community and say, we want the best and the brightest from your community. And every single community, and particularly this one. This is the fastest growing community in California and the United States, right along with Latinos. It's a community that works hard, plays by the rules, and a community that wants fair representation and wants a leader that respects them. All of us would be that kind of a leader. But let's be clear, I got the record on it. LA is bigger than San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland, and San Diego. It's the most like being governor. And I was a leader who was everybody's mayor, oftentimes described as the first mayor from a particular community, even though I wasn't from that community. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our candidates for your responses and to our community leaders for questions that grounded the conversation. This concludes the question portion for our forum. We will now move on to 1-minute closing remarks from each candidate. I'm going to read out the order. We're going to start with Candidate Steyer, then Candidate Villaraigosa, then Candidate Yee, and then lastly, Candidate Becerra. Candidate Steyer.
So insanity is doing the same thing over and over and thinking you're going to get a different outcome. When we look at California, we need structural change. And that's what I'm talking about. I don't have time to take you through each one, but in terms of electricity, housing, artificial intelligence, we need structural change. And that's what I'm doing, and that's why you know that that's what I'm doing, because these people are coming after me. PG&E is spending millions of dollars to try and make me look bad. Uber is spending money. The realtors are spending money against me. And just so you know, 2 days ago, as a result of the ICE plan that we put out, both Elon Musk and Donald Trump sent me a love letter that said, I'm a loser and a sleazebag. you know that if all of those people are coming after me, that I'm actually trying to make a difference, and they know it, and they're scared. And they're right. I am going to make a difference, and I'm going to make a difference for the working people of this state.
Candidate Villaraigosa.
Thank you, muchas gracias. Thank you for being here. Kamsahamnida, Shia Shia, Salamat po, and arigato. I can greet people, I can thank people, I could say goodbye because I've been in every one of these communities. And I'm going to say this to you. The biggest challenge facing California is the challenge of affordability. The next governor is going to have to zero in on it. We're going to have to make sure that people can afford gas and rent and buy a home and live the American dream. That dream is disappearing for too many of our kids. I promise you, I never forgot where I came from. I grew up with nothing. I grew up with a mom who struggled every single day to make ends meet. And I knew I had a responsibility. And that responsibility would make sure that people didn't have to go through the same thing. I will do that. I'd be honored to have your support. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Candidate Yee.
Thank you. I'm sitting here reflecting about how we started our day, and just very honored to be wearing this lei, to be completely present with all of you. I'm going to say this. All of my colleagues on the stage, I don't think you're going to find a whole lot of disagreement among us. But what I will say is that the work to be done is going to be hard. It's not going to be about garnering headlines, because frankly, there aren't going to be a lot of good ones. It's going to be about how to do the unglamorous work of governing. And this is where I believe my experience has shown that I can do this. I've been a former state budget director. I was your state controller for the last 8 years. Uncovered just about $7.3 billion in misspending. And we just have to do better. But we can't tackle the affordability crisis if we don't have a governor who is going to fix our state budget. We're not going to be able to tax our way out of it. We're certainly not going to be able to cut our way out of it, and certainly not like what Doge did. But we need to grow the economy that includes all of you. Thank you.
And lastly, Candidate Becerra.
I have taken on a reckless federal government, ruthless corporations. I have defended workers' rights, women's health, immigrants' rights. I have launched investigations, civil rights investigations. I launched the 988 suicide prevention and mental health hotline that is now a replacement for 911 for people who need help. I have taken down sex trafficking operations and organized crime operations. I'm the only candidate who's actually balanced a budget larger than the state of California 4 times. I'm the only candidate running for governor who has actually had to declare a national state of emergency and deploy resources and personnel to pull us out of that crisis. The governor's office is not a place for on-the-job training. There aren't training wheels waiting for you when you get there. You need someone who knows how to fight, but you really need someone who knows how to win. That's what I will do when I'm your governor. I will fight and win.
Thank you. Now I'm going to invite Esther and Nancy back onto the stage for some final remarks.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you again to our moderators, Andrea and Dr. Chan. And thank you to our 5 candidates, Betty Yee, Javier Becerra, Tom Steyer, Tony Thurmond, and Antonio Villaraigosa for participating in today's AANHPI California Gubernatorial Forum. Thank you. We hope those who attended and those who will watch the recording after the event walk away with understanding a little bit more about the candidates vying for an opportunity to represent you and serve you as your next governor. And I just want to say a very quick thank you to the KADC board and also CAUSE's board for today. And if you just raise your hand to be recognized, I want folks to know that these were our folks along with our organizations.
And I also want to make sure that I recognize our founding board member and chair, Charlie Wu, who's also here today. So thank you all for being here. We are really happy you all stayed. We really enjoyed hearing and learning more about all of you and staying pretty on time. I love it. Today is a reflection of what happens when our communities come together with intention. The conversations we've had here today will not end in this room. They will continue through our networks, through shared information, and through the ways we stay engaged in the months ahead. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the leaders in this room. Thank you all for being here, from community leaders to small business owners to caregivers to family members and elders. Each of you carries experience, responsibility, and influence in your own way. It is an honor to be in community with you. Thank you. For those of you here today, we encourage you to connect with the organizations listed in your programs, get to know them, and to learn more about their work, services, and resources. And finally, as we close, we ask for your patience as you exit the building, particularly with the elevators, so that everyone can leave safely. You also have ballots in your hands, hopefully, as well as if you fill them out on your way out, you could have an opportunity to win a $50 gift card for Cafe Dulce, which I'll work out with you. Surprise. We just also want to encourage you to tell us your thoughts. We'll share them with the candidates and their teams. And we just want to encourage you to get out there and vote on June 2nd. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us. So good to see you.